Poisoning of Abbot Greenwell. Around June 1447, the abbot of Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire, northern England, John Greenwell, was poisoned by a monk, William Downham, also Downham. By the 15th century, Fountains was the richest abbey in England, and its abbot was an important figure in local political society. The first half of the century saw it racked with internal strife, including a disputed election, which had violent repercussions and possibly embezzlement. Greenwell appears to have brought a degree of peace to the abbey upon his election, but he does not seem to have been popular. Downham poisoned a dish of pottage, which he then attempted to feed the abbot while the latter was sick. Greenwell survived, and the case became notorious. Although it took over a year and discussions with Fountain's mother, House of Chateau Abbey Downham, who may have already been an apostate. What the fuck is an apostate? Was eventually expelled. Greenwell himself remained controversial and was both the accused and accuser in local lawsuits. Later incurred the distrust of King Edward IV for his political leanings. Greenwell eventually resigned in 1471. Downham stayed a monk after being expelled from Fountains and may have joined Kirkstead Abbey in Lincolnshire, following which he disappears from the record. I have no idea what I just said. Any of this. Background. By the 15th century, Fountains Abbey, approximately 3 miles, 5 kilometers southwest of Ripon, Yorkshire, was the richest and most important Cistercian abbey in the country. It was also a period of turbulence and discord for the house. Trouble began on the death of Abbot Robert Burley in 1410. The subsequent abbatial election was heavily disputed. With bitter argument, accusations of electoral fraud and violence, which climaxed in the physical eviction of the incumbent John Ripon and his replacement by Roger Frank. It was eventually necessary for the abbots of Greenwell and Greenwell to intervene and restore order. They declared for Ripon. Frequent, if sporadic, outbreaks of dissension among the monks continued for the remainder of Ripon's advocacy. Ripon's successor, Thomas Paslew, was ill for much of his tenure, eventually succumbing to paralysis. What do you mean? He resigned a year before his death in 1443. He, in turn, was succeeded by John Martin, who died 7 weeks after the election. It's not funny. John Greenwell, a monk of Fountains, was elected abbot in October 1442. He made his profession of obedience to George Neville, Archbishop of York, in January the following year. Although described by the historian Michael Spence, I don't know why that made me laugh, as an outstanding personality of the period. His biographer at the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography argued that Greenwell's advocacy was not without difficulties. In 1445, the Archbishop was forced to issue edicts forbidding interference in the business of Fountains or its residents by local people. The Abbot of Fountains was an important local figure and political officer in his own right. It is on this account that Greenwell was close to the local nobility. These included Richard Neville, Earl of Salisbury, Henry Percy, Earl of Northumberland, to whom he was a regular visitor at their Yorkshire castles at Middleham and Topcliffe, respectively. Greenwell also entertained Richard, Duke of York, at the monastic house of Swang's Grange. Notwithstanding Fountain's wealth and importance, it only housed 35 monks by 1447. Poisonings within enclosed religious communities were relatively rare. They account for 6% of all poisonings recorded in the 400 years between 1200 and 1600. And among monks, not mercs, monks, they are even scarcer. On the other hand, 20% of recorded poisonings within enclosed communities were committed by nuns, who were, though, still only 2.4% of all criminal nuns. This was not the first attack on an abbot by poison of the 15th century. In 1405 and 1440, the superiors of Beeley and Norton also died by poison, presumed to be administered by one of their brethren. It was also not the last known attempt. In January of 1493, following an investigation, the abbots of Stratford, Langthorne, and Woburn reported an attempt with poison on the life of Abbot John Bright at Warden Abbey. Poisoning. Though the crises that had wrecked the fountains early in the century appeared to have died down, in 1447 an even greater crisis broke out. A monk, William Downham, was accused of trying to poison Greenwell shortly before 11 June, the date on which he was charged with the offense. Downham was a veteran of his house, having been ordained an acolyte in June 1425. He likely held a senior position within the abbatial hierarchy, as he later faced further accusations of failing to file accounts for his offices over several years. Greenwell had been ill. During his sickness, Downham, unprompted, made him a bowl of soup, or pottage. However, when the historical record gives no explanation as to why, it was requested that he taste the dish before Greenwell supped, Downham refused to do so. The Earl of Salisbury was then in London on royal council business when news of the attack reached him. He dispatched one of his surgeons, Henry Wells of Middleham, to Fountains to attend the abbot. Greenwell survived, and Downham is confessed to his crime. The reason he gave for refusing to taste the food was that he personally did not like the flavor. It was subsequently recorded that the father abbot of the monastery was afflicted with a serious illness, where and when the said William Downham had certain pottages prepared for the abbot himself and offered to him, and then, when requested in virtue of holy obedience to taste, he expressly refused and did other unlawful things, although the nature of these other things did not let him parry upon. Get out. Although Downham's motives for poisoning Greenwell are unknown, none was suggested by contemporaries. Greenwell's biographer, John Walker, speculates that there may have been a pre-existing enmity between the two men. Oh my god, who could have guessed? Downham was alleged to have been responsible for the abbey accruing massive debts that Greenwell subsequently managed to reduce by 1,000 marks. The mark was a currency or unit of account in many states. Its name that may have been a result of him appropriating abbey funds to dispense. While he also seems to have challenged his order on occasion, both in authority and doctrine. Ooh. During his subsequent interrogation, Downham swore to not voluntarily conceal debts which are due to aforesaid monastery, nor to harm the bodily health of my abbot, Master John Greenwell.
Nothing's getting past me.
The medieval... What the fuck is a medievalist? The medievalist Julie Kerr suggests that Downham's may have been an extreme response to the often claustrophobic atmosphere of monasteries, which she argues could be, at times, a hothouse of emotions. While abbots were able to leave the cloister freely. What the fuck is that? Oh, I know what those are. Thus escaping the source if need be of their affront, ordinary monks had left opportunity for such self-management. Despite being expected to avoid anger and extreme emotion, it may be, says Kerr, that Dunham was sufficiently angered by Greenwell's refusal to eat his soup that he took an immediate, possibly unthinking revenge. Well, clearly he didn't think, because he didn't... Never mind. The investigation the investigation subsequently accused Dunham of Okay, let me try this. Non pauca crimina et errores. Not a few crimes and errors. It is possible this was not the first time Dunham has been suspected of such activities. He appears to have had similar trouble on a previous occasion, although for whether anything as serious as poisoning is unknown. Apostasy is another possibility, as he appears to have left fountains without permission, albeit repenting before the abbots of Newminster and Kirkstead on 11 May 1448. Perhaps referencing this event, one of the monks who later witnessed the official accusation against Dunham, William Hull, qualified his signature with the comment conscius de primis eribus in ultima rebellion. In knowledge of earlier errors in the first rebellion. This was considered relevant enough to remain on the record in the knowledge that it would have been seen by the mother house, Chateau Abbey, to whom Dunham was being reported. What's a mother house? Okay. Letters to Chateau. The principal source for historians' knowledge on these events is a collection of letters and depositions sent from fountains to the abbot of Chateau, which thoroughly documented the poisoning and Dunham's subsequent expulsion. These were legally notarized documents and comprised a complaint drawn up by the chapter house and another signed and sealed by a convocation of 18 Cistercian abbots which met in Leicester in July 1448. The compilation, as eventually received at Chateau, was probably finalized by 28 December 1448, although the documents themselves range between then and 11 June 1447. At some point after the affair became public knowledge, a notorious scandal for the fountains, the most important Cistercian abbey in the country. Dunham seems to have temporarily escaped the abbey, apostatizing himself again, as a record shows that Greenwell ordered his recapture on 2 June 1449. Statement of Henry Wells, physician. Later events. The same day as the abbey's dispatch to Chateau, 28 December 1449, his condemnation being complete, Dunham was formally expelled from fountains. The protracted period between the poisoning and Dunham's leaving, says Talbot, indicates the trouble, expense, and complicated legal processes which one disgruntled member of a community could bring upon his abbey. Greenwell's advocacy continued to be involved in frequent controversy. He was unpopular locally, and in 1451 he was forced, as writ of recognizance, to provide securities for his good behavior towards all the people. Greenwell's spirited defense of his house's tithes appeared to have been a particular source of contention. The same year, as part of increased ill-feeling between the local families of Percy and Neville, Fountains was attacked by Salisbury's son John with the outbreak of civil war in 1459. Greenwell was an adherent of Lancaster when the Yorkist claimant won the throne in 1461 as Edward IV. Greenwell was taken to London and placed under a bond of £2,000, equivalent to about £2 million in 2023, to keep the king's peace. What the fuck is the king's peace? No, don't. Stay focused. For context, the Abbey's annual income around this time was approximately 1,155 pounds, equivalent to 1,000,000 pounds in 2023. Okay. Greenwell survived until at least 1470, when his application to the Pope to resign as abbot was granted, perhaps indicative of lingering resentment. No mention of Greenwell's advocacy was made in the record of Swinton's election as abbot in 1471, even though it was customary to honor a new abbot's predecessor by doing so. Little is known as Dunham after his expulsion from Fountains. He appears to have subsequently joined Kirkstead Abbey, Lincolnshire at some point, after which he disappears from the records. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't have any idea what I just read. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me, specifically, because I'm uneducated. But I read it.